What if the greatest victory in history wasn't won with blazing swords or thundering armies, but in a silence so profound it shook the foundations of eternity? Picture a rugged hill outside Jerusalem where a king hung on a cross, his labored breaths echoing in a world cloaked in unnatural darkness. Above him, unseen by mortal eyes, two of heaven's mightiest angels stood watch: Michael, the warrior, and Uriel, the bearer of divine light. Their presence wasn't just a footnote to this moment, it was a testament to a cosmic drama unfolding, one that would rewrite the destiny of every soul, including yours. What was happening on that hill called Golgotha, and why did it hold the universe in breathless suspense over 70,000 divine warriors, each more fearsome than human minds could grasp, stood ready to tear the earth apart to save him? Recall how 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 37 reveals that a single angel struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in one night. Now imagine that power multiplied beyond comprehension, poised at the edge of a single word from Jesus. He could have called down fire from heaven, as Elijah did against Ahaziah's men, turning Golgotha into a smoldering ruin and reducing Lucifer's forces to ash. Yet, no fire fell, no thunder roared. Instead, a haunting stillness enveloped the scene, broken only by the faint, struggling breaths of the crucified king. In the unseen realms, that silence roared louder than 1,000 storms. High above, Michael's towering form stood taut, every muscle coiled, his hand gripping his sword so tightly that celestial energy rippled outward, warping the spiritual air. His gaze flicked to Uriel, whose very being burned with prophetic fire, eyes fixed unyieldingly on Jesus' anguished face from the heights of heaven. Could these mighty guardians, who had defended heaven's throne and delivered divine judgments, have grasped a truth about this moment that we still struggle to understand? If you stood there, surrounded by unseen forces, angels holding their breath, demons scattering in confusion, wouldn't your heart tremble? Might you begin to see that true power lies not in violent outbursts, but in the quiet surrender of a king who chose sacrifice over conquest? Yet this was only the beginning, a glimpse of a divine plan woven into the fabric of eternity, stretching far beyond the dusty hill of Golgotha. Michael and Uriel stood as silent sentinels, their towering presence a testament to a cosmic strategy unfolding, one that hell itself had failed to anticipate. They knew something was coming, something that would not only shatter the chains of death, but ripple through the ages, touching every soul, every struggle, even the quiet battles you wage in moments of doubt and despair. Before the first spark of light ever pierced the primordial void, before the stars sang their first hymn of praise, a scroll rested in the throne room of heaven, sealed 7 times by the hand of God himself. This wasn't merely a document, it was the eternal blueprint of redemption, its sacred folds inscribed with every detail of the universe's salvation. Every prophecy burned within it like living flame, each one a blazing promise etched in divine fire. Every tear shed, every heartbeat offered, every cry of anguish was meticulously scripted to guide humanity from the ashes of ruin to the radiant glory of restoration. Can you fathom such a scroll? To think that long before Eve drew her first breath in Eden's garden, before Adam's feet touched its verdant soil, your story, your pain, your hopes, your redemption was already written in its divine lines. Your failures, your dreams, the moments you thought defined you, all accounted for in a plan that spanned the breadth of eternity. This scroll wasn't a vague outline, it was a masterpiece of divine precision, mapping out the exact path from humanity's fall to its ultimate rescue, with every step calculated before the foundations of the world were laid. On that fateful day on Golgotha, as Jesus hung in agony, his body broken and his blood pooling in the dust, those sacred seals began to break, one by one, under the watchful gaze of all creation. This wasn't chaos or defeat, it was the deliberate unveiling of a plan so vast, so intricate, that even eternity itself seemed to pause in reverence. holding its breath as the divine drama unfolded. The jeering crowds, the mocking soldiers, the scheming religious leaders, they saw only a man dying in shame. But the heavens saw a king fulfilling a purpose older than time. Jesus wasn't there because he was overpowered. How could he be? The one through whom all things were made. As Jonah chapter 1 verse 3 confirms, he chose this descent, this suffering, not as a victim but as a conqueror, waging a war no sword, no legion, no earthly power could fight. This was a conflict unlike any other, where victory demanded plunging deeper than death itself, into realms darker than humanity's worst sins, lower than the deepest caverns of hell, only to rise from within them, wearing their defeat like a crown of triumph. This was no ordinary battle, it was a cosmic chess match, played out on a rugged cross, where every move was calculated before the first star was hung in the sky. The cross wasn't a place of defeat, but a battlefield where the king fought with weapons no army could wield. Love, sacrifice, obedience to a divine will that saw beyond the pain to the glory awaiting. Uriel, the radiant guardian of divine mysteries, understood this strategy, his very being pulsing with the foreknowledge of what was unfolding. The weight of this moment scorched his immortal soul, as if the fire of divine truth burned hotter than ever before, illuminating a path that would lead from a bloodied hill to the redemption of countless souls. Yet he stood unwavering, his light a beacon that pierced the darkness, revealing the contours of a plan too vast for human minds to grasp. Michael, the unyielding fortress of celestial war, felt the resonance of this moment in his eternal bones, his presence a bulwark against any force that dared to interfere. His sword, forged in the fires of creation, was ready to enforce the king's decree, ensuring that no power seen or unseen could disrupt the cosmic transaction unfolding. This was the appointed hour, the fulcrum of history, where the fate of all creation hung in the balance, suspended between heaven's promise and hell's resistance. Yet, despite their knowledge, both angels stood in a tension no celestial being had ever known helplessness. They, who had toppled empires with a single command, who had shaken the heavens with their might, could not act unless the sun gave the order. Their swords remained sheathed, their wings still, their power held in check by a divine decree that bound them to watch, to wait, to trust. Their hearts, if angels can be said to have hearts, burned with the weight of a moment that would redefine eternity itself. Can you feel the gravity of that restraint? Doesn't it make you wonder if, in your own moments of powerlessness when you feel trapped, unable to fight the battles before you, there might be a greater purpose unfolding, one that requires you to trust in a plan you cannot yet see? Could your struggles, your moments of silence and surrender, be part of a larger story, where heaven's forces are aligned, waiting for the moment to act on your behalf? What if your darkest nights are the very ground where divine victories are being prepared, unseen by human eyes but orchestrated by the hand of God? Then, in a moment that split the heavens, the king's voice broke the silence, shattering the boundaries of earth and eternity. From a throat raw with thirst and pain, Jesus cried out, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This was no mere lament echoing off the stones of Jerusalem, no frail gasp of a man defeated by suffering. It was a roar cloaked in anguish, a declaration so potent it sliced through dimensions like a bolt of lightning cleaving a starless night. Imagine standing there, the air thick with the weight of eternity, the ground trembling beneath your feet as the archangels stiffened, their forms electrified by a surge of divine power radiating from the blood-soaked cross. In that fleeting moment, Michael turned to Uriel, his eyes blazing not with fear, but with a reverence so profound it seemed to bend the constellations themselves. Could even these mighty beings, who had witnessed the creation of galaxies and the fall of rebellious angels, have been awed by the spectacle of love wielded as the ultimate weapon? This cry wasn't a surrender to despair. It was a proclamation that echoed through the spiritual realm, a sound that carried the weight of divine authority, piercing the veil between the seen and unseen. It was as if the heavens themselves paused, the stars holding their breath, as the king's voice carved a path through the darkness, declaring a truth that would reshape the cosmos. In the stillness that followed, the king, bloodied, gasping, throned on rough-hewn timber, issued a command no human ear could discern. No cherubim shouted it, no trumpets blared, no storms tore the heavens apart. Yet every throne, every dominion, every demon lurking in the shadows of the cross felt it, a whisper that pierced the spirit realm like a tremor of holy dread. From Jesus' dying soul, it flowed to Michael and Uriel above, a river of light carrying a message devastatingly simple. Hold the line, guard what is mine. This wasn't a plea for rescue, it was a divine directive, a command that set the spiritual realm ablaze with purpose. Have you ever paused to consider whether such a divine whisper might echo through the chaos of your own life, when you're staggering under burdens that threaten to crush you, when your prayers seem to vanish into cold silence? Could heaven's armies be standing in formation, holding their ground at the king's command, guarding destinies written in that ancient scroll, including yours? Imagine the possibility that in your moments of greatest weakness, when all seems lost, heaven is moving, aligning forces you cannot see, executing decrees spoken over your life that no human ear can hear. What if the battles you face, grief, doubt, fear, are not fought alone, but are overseen by celestial warriors, poised to act at the king's word? This command, issued from a cross, was no ordinary word. It was a declaration that shifted the axis of eternity, a whisper that made galaxies tremble and dark powers snap to attention. As Colossians chapter 1 verses 16 to 19 affirms, Jesus is the one through whom all things were made, and in whom all things hold together, bleeding, crowned with thorns. His whisper carried the weight of divine sovereignty, unshaken by the nails, the lashes, or the mockery of the crowd. He stood at the crossroads of two realities. His broken body hung in the world of dust and breath, where Roman soldiers gambled for his robe and crowds spat curses into the heavy air. But his soul was already descending into the shadowed depths of death, reaching into the realm reserved for sin's wages. Through every lash, every nail, every gasping breath, his divine authority remained absolute, unbreakable, eternal. Michael, heaven's champion, moved into precise formation, his towering form a living fortress clad in armor forged before time began. Daniel chapter 10 verses 20 to 21 reveals he contended with spiritual powers over Persia and Greece, guarding Israel's destiny when earthly kings forgot their creator. Revelation chapter 12 verses 7 to 9 describes how he cast the dragon and his rebellious angels from heaven's heights, a victory that echoed through the ages. On Golgotha, he was no bystander. His sword, unsheathed, wasn't drawn to spill human blood, but to protect a transaction of cosmic proportions, Jesus bearing the sins of all humanity, your failures, your shame, your inherited curses. This wasn't just a weight on his shoulders, it was a legal exchange. The perfect lamb absorbing every stain so no accusation from hell could stand against those who trust him. Imagine the weight of that moment, as the king's blood sealed a covenant that would echo through time, rewriting the destiny of every soul. Could this same covenant be at work in your life, covering your failures, silencing accusations, and opening a path to freedom you never thought possible as hell gathered to watch? Michael stood as an unyielding sentinel, ensuring no shadow could disrupt the sacred act unfolding on the cross. Demons pressed close, their foul forms clustering around Golgotha like vultures circling a dying prey, their eyes glinting with malice as they sought loopholes in heaven's law, hoping to twist the covenant being forged in blood. Their whispers hissed through the spiritual realm, probing for weaknesses, searching for any flaw in the divine plan that could be exploited to derail redemption. But Michael was an impregnable wall, his presence a barrier between heaven's promise and hell's schemes. His sword, shimmering with celestial fire, stood ready to enforce the king's decree, ensuring no demon, no matter how cunning or ancient, could tamper with the transaction unfolding. He couldn't stop the Roman nails or ease the physical torment tearing through Jesus's body, but in the spiritual realm, he was unstoppable, guarding the blood-writ contract with unwavering resolve. His towering form loomed like a fortress, his eyes scanning the unseen realms for any threat, his blade a silent testament to the unyielding justice of God. Every demon that dared approach felt the weight of his presence, a reminder that this moment was under divine protection, sealed by a power no darkness could challenge. Uriel, unlike Michael, wasn't forged for the clash of swords or the thunder of armies. He was a flame of revelation, his light exposing darkness with a clarity that burned through every shadow. Corinthians chapter 5 verse 21 states, Jesus became sin itself, the light of the world, plunging into darkness to redeem it from within. Uriel ensured this act would transcend that hill, sending waves of divine illumination through centuries, nations, and souls yet to be born. Those waves would blind Saul on the road to Damascus, transforming him into Paul, the apostle of grace, whose words would shape the faith of millions. They would inspire humble fishermen to pen gospels that outlasted Rome's legions, carrying the story of redemption to every corner of the earth. They would break open hearts in lands unmapped, calling worshipers from the shadows of idolatry to the light of truth. As Jesus's blood soaked the cracked Judean dust, Uriel's radiance intensified, weaving strands of revelation into time's tapestry, seeding visions, unlocking scriptures, and awakening destinies. His light wasn't just a passive glow, it was an active force, piercing the darkness of human history, illuminating paths that would lead souls to salvation. Imagine the power of that light, reaching from a bloodied hill to the furthest reaches of time, touching lives in ways no human preacher could. Could those waves still be moving in your life, stirring corners of your soul you thought were lost forever? Might they be illuminating paths you've yet to walk? Breaking chains you've long accepted as permanent. What if the same revelation that transformed fishermen into apostles is even now shining into your struggles, revealing hope where you saw only despair? Uriel's role was to ensure that this moment wasn't confined to a single hill or a single day, but would echo through eternity, reaching even to you in the quiet battles of your heart. At the moment of Jesus's final breath, the world itself fractured under the weight of what was accomplished. The temple's great veil, a towering barrier separating humanity from God's holy presence, tore from top to bottom, not a mere rip in fabric, but the collapse of a spiritual divide that had stood for centuries. This wasn't just cloth, it was a symbol of the chasm between sinful humanity and a holy God. A barrier so sacred that only the high priest could pass it once a year, with trembling hands and sacrificial blood, lest he be struck down by divine wrath. For generations, it was guarded by angelic sentinels, like the cherubim who barred Eden's gates after the fall, their flaming swords a warning to all who dared approach. At Calvary, those guardians, Michael and Uriel among them, stepped back, not in defeat, but in obedience to a new covenant. Jesus' broken body became the bridge across that chasm, rendering veils, rituals, and barriers obsolete. The tearing of the veil was a cosmic declaration. The separation between God and humanity was no more, replaced by a new and living way through the sacrifice of the Lamb. Uriel unleashed a surge of holy light, ensuring this truth would echo through the ages, illuminating hearts across generations, from the streets of ancient Jerusalem to the quiet corners of your life today. His radiance wasn't just a moment's flash, it was a beacon that would shine through centuries, guiding souls to the truth of redemption. Michael sheathed his sword, not as a defeated warrior, but in awe of a victory won through sacrifice, a triumph that needed no blade to enforce its power. His action was a solemn acknowledgement that the fiercest battle for access had been won, not by force, but by love poured out on a cross. This moment whispers to us that even in our darkest hours, when strength fails, when enemies mock, when hope seems buried, heaven might be moving, executing unseen commands that shift our destiny. Could the same power that tore the veil be at work in your life, dismantling barriers you thought impassable? Imagine the walls you've built, fear, shame, doubt beginning to crack under the weight of divine authority. What if the moments when you feel most broken are the very ones where heaven is closest, aligning forces to bring about a victory you cannot yet see? The tearing of the veil wasn't just a historical event. It was a promise that no barrier can stand between you and God's presence, no obstacle too great to be overcome by His sacrifice. This truth reaches into your life, offering hope in the places where you feel most separated, most alone. Could there be unseen sentinels standing guard over your story, ensuring that the King's victory is applied to your battles, but the story plunged deeper into the heart of death itself? As Jesus breathed His last, the earth quaked, rocks split, and the veil tore, but beyond human sight, He descended into Sheol not as a metaphor, but as the sinless Lamb bearing humanity's guilt. Michael followed, a silent storm, his wings bristling with restrained fury, his presence a testament to the gravity of this moment. Uriel, a blazing furnace of divine truth, illuminated paths no light had ever touched, his radiance cutting through the gloom like a celestial torch. Sheol, as Luke chapter 16 verses 19 to 31 describes, was the realm of the dead, divided by an uncrossable chasm, torment for the wicked, peace for the righteous. Jesus entered not as a captive, but as a king. His crucifixion wounds a testament to His authority, scars that bore not His guilt but ours. The moment His presence crossed the threshold, Sheol convulsed, its very foundations trembling under the weight of an uninvited sovereign. Fallen spirits from before the flood, bound in chains of gloom for their rebellion, quivered in dread, their shackles rattling as if sensing an alien terror. The monstrous giants of ancient times, now reduced to tormented shadows, shrank back, their forms cowering before the blaze of holy presence. Even Lucifer, who had left Golgotha smug, certain of victory, felt his dark dominion ripple with fear. An intruder had come, one who needed neither army nor breath to wage his war, one whose authority was woven into the fabric of creation itself. Psalm chapter 24 verses 7 to 10 prophesied this invasion. Lift up your heads, O you gates, that the King of glory may come in. Jesus spoke no plea, only a command open. Gates forged by rebellion groaned and shattered, not by force of steel, but by the weight of divine authority. Imagine the scene: the King of Glory striding through desolate halls, His wounds still fresh, His presence a radiant challenge to the darkness. Michael trailed behind, his face like storm-wrought iron, glowing with pent-up violence he was forbidden to unleash, his sword drawn not to strike but to bear witness. Uriel's brilliance flared, exposing every shadow, revealing truths that had lain hidden since the dawn of time. Every step Jesus took shook the underworld, as if the very walls of Sheol sensed the shift in dominion. Could this same authority be at work in your life, breaking chains in places you've deemed hopeless? Might there be dungeons within you, guilt, fear, despair trembling under His whispered command? Imagine the possibility that the same voice that shattered Sheol's gates is speaking into your struggles, calling forth light where darkness has reigned. What if the locked tombs of your heart, the places where hope seems buried, are already stirring under the weight of His sovereign word? This was no mere descent. It was an invasion, a deliberate march into the heart of death to reclaim what was rightfully his. In Sheol's depths, Jesus didn't negotiate. He claimed what was his by right. Michael stood, his towering form a sentinel of divine justice, his sword raised not to strike but to affirm the legality of this act. His blade was a silent decree, proclaiming to every trembling watcher in the spirit realm fallen angels, imprisoned giants, and the ghosts of rebellion that this transaction was lawful, sealed in the blood spilled on Golgotha. No demon, no matter how cunning or ancient, could challenge the covenant being forged. Michael's presence ensured that hell's schemes would find no foothold, that no loophole could be exploited to derail the redemption unfolding. His sword, shimmering with celestial fire, stood as a testament to the unyielding justice of God, a justice that satisfied every demand of divine law. Uriel, meanwhile, unveiled a scroll of living light, its radiance spilling forth truths hidden since creation's dawn. These were mysteries the prophets had longed to see, truths even angels yearned to understand, yet were forbidden until this moment. Abraham, who stood under a starry sky and heard God swear by his own name, beheld the star his faith had pointed to. Moses, who glimpsed only a shadow of God's glory on Sinai, gazed full into the radiant face of redemption. David, whose psalms danced with prophetic rapture, sang anew with tears streaming as he saw the final lamb. Elijah, once swept up in a chariot of flame, witnessed a fire far holier, the flame of divine love consuming sin itself. This was no mere descent. It was a cosmic jailbreak, a shattering of shackles that had bound generations. The underworld, accustomed to gloom and regret, was flooded with revelation, as souls who had waited in faith beheld the fulfillment of promises whispered across centuries. The chasm that divided Sheol, once uncrossable, was bridged by the king's presence, his authority dismantling the barriers that held the righteous captive. Uriel's light wove through time, seeding visions, unlocking scriptures, and calling future generations from darkness to light. This was the moment when the promises of old spoken to patriarchs, sung by psalmists, glimpsed by prophets came alive in a blaze of divine truth. Are there prisons in your life, regrets, fears, wounds that might be trembling under this same power? Could spiritual scrolls be opening over your story, declaring debts paid, captives freed, destinies restored? Imagine the weight of that truth settling into your heart. The same force that broke Sheol's gates is at work in your struggles, turning locked tombs into open doors, transforming despair into hope. What if the chains you've carried, guilt, shame, fear, are already weakening under the king's command, ready to fall at his word at the heart of Sheol? Jesus reached out, and the keys of death and Hades appeared, shimmering with eternal power. These weren't keys of iron or stone, but divine instruments etched with the living language of eternity, pulsing with the very breath of God. No demon, no matter how vile or ancient, dared speak as he claimed them not by theft, but by right, as the one who had satisfied every demand of divine justice. Lucifer, once the bright morning star, now twisted into the prince of shadows, stood powerless, his smug confidence shattered. The silence was deafening, thick with dread, as the underworld realized this was no mere act of bravado. It was a rightful reclamation by the Creator himself. Then, with 3 words, time to rise. Jesus shattered death's hold. Resurrection began here, in the bowels of death's fortress, not at the tomb outside Jerusalem. Chains that had coiled around souls for centuries burst apart like brittle reeds. Shackles fell from patriarchs and prophets who had waited in faith in dim corners of the spiritual realm. Angels, silent for generations, lit torches of holy flame, driving back shadows that had never known such brilliance. Michael stood guard, his sword ensuring no dark power could contest this mass exodus, his presence a living verdict that this victory was lawful. Uriel, radiant with mysteries unveiled, unleashed waves of divine light that ignited destinies long delayed, opening eyes in ways no earthly preacher could. This was no quiet escape. It was a conquest from within, a dismantling of death's claim at its core. Jesus didn't slip out of death's back door. He stormed its throne room, leaving it in ruin when he rose 3 days later in the dawn's light. He didn't emerge alone. He led a procession of liberated souls, a parade of freedom that stretches through time, reaching even to your heart. Picture not just a stone rolling aside, but gates splitting open, death stripped of power, and Jesus declaring your freedom. Could those words, "Time to rise," be echoing in your soul, unlocking doors you thought sealed forever? Imagine the locked places in your life: grief, addiction, shame stirring under the weight of that command, ready to burst open into new life. What if the same power that shattered Sheol's chains is moving in your story, calling you to rise from your own tombs? This was more than a moment. It was a triumph for every moment after, including yours. Jesus, mocked and broken, was never defeated. From the cross, he commanded celestial armies, orchestrating a victory that rewrote your destiny. Michael guarded the covenant with his sword. Uriel unveiled its truths with his light. When Jesus declared, "It is finished," the cosmos shifted, heaven stood at attention, and hell trembled. Your battles aren't fought alone. Even when your strength fails, when your prayers seem lost, angels enforce decrees over your life, and divine light breaks your chains. The King who stormed Sheol still speaks. Time to rise. This isn't just poetry, it's your spiritual reality. Imagine your darkest hours when you feel abandoned, when enemies circle, when hope seems buried. Could they be the stage for your greatest victories? Crafted by unseen hands, heaven doesn't operate by human optics. It moves by what God has spoken, often through pain, in whispers that echo into glory. Let this truth anchor you. Your struggles are not the end, but the beginning of a story where heaven is moving, even in your silence. If this stirs your heart, stay with us. Like, subscribe, share this with someone needing hope, and comment maybe "wow" or "what moved you most." Thank you for joining this journey through mysteries that span from ancient scrolls to your life. May the God who conquered death lead you into victories beyond imagination. God bless you abundantly.